Hey everyone, today we're going to be replacing all three gaskets on this Maytag French door refrigerator freezer combo. Having a look inside, we'll see that after over 10 years of service, as the gaskets failed and moisture accumulates on both the inside and outside, there's some cold air, we see some cracks, mildew will form, mold will form, and the other side is not as bad, but there are areas where it has cracked here in the corner and mold has formed. It's time for these gaskets to be replaced. The freezer is no exception, as we'll find most of the damage is behind the gasket on the freezer and not even visible from up front. We're going to replace the top two gaskets first. I'm going to try and order them from eBay and waste a lot of money trading cost for quality, but you're all going to get to learn from this cautionary tale. For whatever reason, I thought gaskets that cost half the price of OEM would work just as good. Let's see how well that works out. Warning information about handling the gaskets is provided in the package. I take them out now. The box that came in is so small they're extremely crumpled and distorted. My freezer seal was from an OEM distributor, came in a much larger box even though it's a smaller seal, and you can see it's wrapped better. There's also an extra part here that's beyond the scope of this video that I've ordered. There is a color contrast between the OEM and non-OEM seals. The OEM ones are a dark gray. The non-OEMs are not. We're going to start first on the left-hand door and pull that flap outward. This will expose the screw that's there, and that is a 1/4 inch. Removing that screw now, it is the single screw we'll be removing this entire project. Then gently pulling up on the entire bar, we'll release it from its mounts, just like that, pulling it away slightly to remove this electrical connection here. There's a little clip on the end, compressed, will allow the wire to be disconnected and the bar removed. I'm demonstrating that if you can't pull this away to start the seal, you could use a flathead screwdriver to get the seal removal started. I found that you don't need to. You can just pull it hard enough to get the seal started. Starting in a corner would also be easier. You could just start it with a screwdriver, and once started, you can work your way all around the perimeter. And that's it, the seal's removed. Very easy. It is imperative that the area behind the seal where the seal mounts to is absolutely clean, and you can be sure that it's going to be filled with mold and mildew and whatnot that was trapped inside there for all these years. I'm spraying it with a cleaner, and now I'm working it in with a paper towel, getting into the crease. You see all that black? That's black mold. Not good. I had found that letting it soak for several minutes after I sprayed it was also effective in helping to loosen up all this mold and nastiness from inside the seal area. The big takeaway from this portion of the video is cleaning these areas, these crevices where the seals lock into, is not optional, and it must be perfectly clean or you're going to have a problem. And how clean should it be? Having never been exposed to anything but the seal, it should look like this, perfectly clean. We'll also see mating surfaces on the bottom that need to be tended to that are directly next to where the seal was. And these areas that are on the fridge where the seal butts up against that mating surface. So I take my time, make sure all these surfaces are as clean as humanly possible, or else stuff is going to fester under there when the seals go back in. And everything here is looking nice now. Here's the fridge mating surface, and here's the lower mating surface on the fridge. I have made my point on preparation and cleanliness. I'm moving past this now. Though I'll note, keep in mind the back side by the door where it meets the refrigerator, that surface too could be filled with mold. This mechanism, which I've removed, is also covered in mold and will be sprayed and cleaned. Again, we're starting off with a cautionary tale, so I'm going to say don't go out and buy cheap gaskets. They're going to be installed properly, but we're going to see the problems with them, and we can see how contorted they are. Some manufacturers actually recommend soaking them in warm water for several hours, but they actually have air holes in them that would fill up with water. A somewhat effective method was with a heat gun if you're really careful and you don't melt them. Remember, these things were really contorted. It wasn't just about getting the seals to not have any ripples in them. Mine was really twisted. If you take a look, you can see, especially towards the middle here where it's folded on the left side, it's really bent up. So it took a lot of work with the heat gun. I'll show a much better method in a couple of minutes. And the seal did mount correctly, so I'm going to show it with the old seal, starting from the top and this flap This thin flap always is towards the center, pointing towards the other door. Starting from the top again, the two corners followed by that top piece, and I'm pushing it into that recess that holds the seal, making sure it's not crimped or anything like that. I want it to look like it's seated correctly, and you could see if it's incorrectly. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, get the corners, and then in between. Once the corners are in, making sure everything is secured. Then I'm going to walk down the sides, and as I do, I want to make sure, again, the seal doesn't fold over. You can see this folding over, and I'm lifting to straighten it down so it looks like this. And then I'm sort of walking it down, pushing the seal in as I walk down, making sure this wire doesn't get caught under it. I push down to continue, making my way to the bottom. Then I'll make my way to the other side and do the same thing, walking it down to the bottom, making sure that nothing's crimped as I make my way down. We see I have to keep sliding my finger back up as the end of the seal gets crimped to uncrimp it, and then I push down, slide my finger up. That happens sometimes in the middle where that seal was uneven because it was so deformed. We won't see this issue on the OEM seal. As we make it to this bottom corner, the seal should now be fully seated, and now we inspect it. Finding any irregularities, we use the heat gun very carefully to apply heat on and away, over and over again, and we could see that it will work those out on these gaskets to a degree, and there's lots of areas on these gaskets where we have these deformities, so I have to spend a lot of time. I'm not going to show all of them, but we will see that those two will disappear. Up top is a good example of how the heat gun applied carefully can remove the deformities in these seals. As we look now, it is gone. Spend a whole lot of time on a whole bunch of other areas doing the same exact thing until I don't see any more deformities in the seal. I bring the bar back over and plug the connector back in. Now I'm going to line up all three tabs, the center and the two extremity tabs, top and bottom, and then when they're lined up, I'll push down to lock it into position. I'm going to inspect everywhere to make sure I didn't jump the tracks on one or more of them. Everything looks good, so I'm going to install that screw now and tighten it in. Remember, tightening into plastic so I don't have to beat the hell out of it, just snug it. Pushing the flap to the forward position, I close the door, and it has a real spongy feeling, and I don't feel any resistance from the magnet. It seems awfully weak, very spongy. So I'm going to continue with the other side because maybe the seal needs time to set in, that sort of thing, and the weather is a little cold outside. So this one was in really, really bad disarray compared to the other one. And this is at 2,000 times the speed to see how long it's taken with the heat gun to straighten this out and being careful not to melt it at the same time. Absolutely horrific. And I'll point out again, regardless if they were cheap seals or OEM seals, I have a much better method of doing this that I'll show shortly. This was the best that I had at the time. The entire cleaning process is repeated, and I think I made all my points about that last time, so I'm not going to repeat it again. The technique for the installation of seal is the exact same thing, with the tabs pointed outward or facing the other door when closed, depending on your perspective. The seal was in a lot worse condition when it was packaged and was a lot more challenging to install than the previous one. Again, I'll say everything about the installation of the product is correct. It's just the quality of this particular product that proved to be its failure, the magnet, and how squishy it was. Even all the fine-tuning work that we see here with the heat gun that straightened out the seal, everything just seemed like it wouldn't make a good or reliable seal when you close the door. I didn't trust it. I wasn't going to go with it, and I decided to get some quality seals. And you're reading this correct. These seals are twice the cost as the other ones, but these are genuine OEM parts from Whirlpool. These arrived in a box that was easily 3 times the size, a lot less contorted than the other seals as arrived, so it had that much going for it right out of the box. Now, excusing the pollen, I laid this on the hood of my car on a sunny day and just straightened it out and left it there for an entire day. This is what it looked like when it started, and then I flipped it over halfway through the day and let it sit through the evening. And this is what we got. It is perfectly fixed. There's no more creases or anything, ready for install. I'm going to take a minute to go over the old seals right quick, and you can see that they're wavy and kind of bent, and they didn't have the advantage of preparation, but we could see the sort of squeaks. like squishy, and there's no magnetic resistance whatsoever grabbing these seals. Same thing on this side. It's like when you close it, the magnet, it just doesn't grab. The door just falls open. I just wasn't happy with them. I didn't think that they would be reliable. So I'm going to rip them out, and we're just going to replace these with the proper seals. I'm not going to show the install of these. It's exactly the same as the seals from before. We'll go over the after actions of the install. Now these seals are much more rigid, they're straighter, they look very sharp, except the corners that are going to need a little bit of work. But other than the corners that I could take care of, these are much more closer aligned to the seals that originally came with the refrigerator than the ones I just had in. The heat gun is used very sparingly and only in the corners, as you see here, to raise up these areas that are crumpled. Of course, I still have to be extremely careful when I do this procedure because I still run the risk of burning the seals if I get too close with the heat gun or spend too much time in one particular spot with the heat gun, so caution right there. But that's it. These two refrigerator door seals are done. Everything looking good here too with the refrigerator door closed. Time to move on to the freezer seals. Starting to lift the freezer seals just like the fridge seals reveals an unbelievable amount of nastiness behind the seal. So that's something. So now the entire seal is peeled off around the perimeter, starting at the top and then working the sides, the bottom, up and around through the other side. And then the seal can be pulled around the front of the freezer door to remove it from the unit. And there's just an incredible amount of mold here on the inner portion of the seal on the corner where there is some damage. Look at that. The cleaning regimen for the freezer door is exactly the same as it was for the front door, just spraying everything and cleaning everything with paper towels, giving it an inspection all around, making sure this detent is facing me that goes into the freezer door. Just very gently, very carefully wrap it around the door, working it around the perimeter. And then I just let it sit. Again, starting in the top corner as I did before, I seat that corner, followed by the corner over on the other side, being sure to lift out any areas of the seal that get rolled over like this. And then I finish the top, working my way around, making sure the seal doesn't roll over like we see here, straightening each piece as I go along. Then I continue on with the sides, working my way down. And finally the bottom, which is a little bit different because you have to do it by feel. There's no visibility, but you can feel the seal go in, and then afterwards you can look under and control everything that you just did. And we see it looks good, but there are areas that are still going to need to be treated by the heat gun. The corners here, and then a couple of ridges we see. Heat is carefully applied. Under here it's especially difficult because there's limited room, but with care, working slowly, it is possible. The corners are treated with heat in the same exact manner as the bottom was. And that's it, the freezer drawer is done. All the seals look very nice when they're closed. Everything is straight, nothing is bent or twisted in any way. And lesson learned, buy cheap seals and pay twice. And that concludes this door and seal replacement on this Maytag refrigerator, including lessons learned about buying cheap seals. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below. Helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?